Welcome to the Real Estate Baddie podcast, where I talk about real estate, entrepreneurship, and current events. I am your host, Tabitha Richardson, and today I have a special guest, Vernon Vaughan, who is the builder extraordinaire. Hello, how are you?
Tabitha, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I am so excited to have you on the show because I have been a fan for a really long time, just admiring your work, seeing what you're doing in the DMV area. So, you're originally from Maryland, right?
Yep. So born in DC, raised in Suitland, Maryland.
Okay. So how did you even get into building?
First I started out in real estate as a wholesaling, fix and flipping, and as we got into 2016, I just kind of saw that there was an opportunity, right? I saw that the market was getting competitive again, right? People were kind of paying more for houses than I would pay, right? I had been through a market cycle. I had been through a whole market cycle. So I wasn't in any rush to overpay for anything. To this day, I'm still not in any rush to overpay for anything. And so I just saw new construction as a pond that almost nobody was fishing from, right? So I saw the opportunity.
So were you in real estate before that?
No.
In any aspect, any role?
Nope. So I came into real estate as an investor. Only I got my real estate license when a very good friend could no longer give me his MLS logins anymore.
We're not going to say that friend's name either.
Yeah, I got a few. This is probably back in 2005, and you got a couple of letters from Maris, and he was like, "Can't do anymore." And I had to.
Because you know what? That was probably the time when we used to have those key fobs. So they used to make you log in with those key fobs, and they can see like where the multiple logins at the same time. So yeah, it was around that time.
So I had to get licensed so I could be able to access the MLS to access inventory, or really more often than not, just use it to run reliable comps. But I've really just been in this industry as an investor and builder.
So like running comps, was it just your own, hey, common sense, or like you didn't have any kind of previous training, didn't go through a program, didn't shadow anyone, you just kind of jumped in there?
Yeah. Before, I remember I had a brother who was licensed, and this is back when for the MLS you had like floppy disk you had to put in, right? So
that's a long time. You're dating, and I'm gonna act like I don't know when that time was.
I used to bug him I used to go to his house in Baltimore, and I'd be there for hours on end, and he'd be like, "All right, man, I'm about to go to bed." But I just kind of taught myself, and having reliable data was always important to me. I prided myself in not having to depend on somebody else to give me an opinion of value, right? When it comes to underwriting a deal, it's got to check the boxes for me, right? Because I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I'm asking investors or partners to put their money and resources where my mouth is. So I've got to
right.
It's got to be right.
So tell us about your first deal.
Okay, so first deal on Gladstone Avenue in Capitol Heights, Maryland was it was supposed to be a lease. It was a lease option deal. I found it from doing door-to-door flyers, believe it or not. I remember it was like a fall day where it gets, winter day where it gets cold where it gets dark at like 5 p.m. And I had a couple hundred flyers, right? And I had been out for a couple of hours, And this was the last neighborhood, and I had, maybe 70 or 80 flyers left.
So wait, what did the flyer say?
Flyers,
What were you trying to
we buy
do?
houses.
Okay, so were you trying to wholesale?
I was trying to do whatever I could. So whatever, that's one thing about me, when the deal presents itself, if you go into it with the idea of it's only going to be a wholesale, it's only going to be a rehab, that's what it'll be. And sometimes it won't be anything because if it doesn't fit that model, it won't fit. But when you kind of go in with an open mind, your options also open up. But anyway, this neighborhood, I had, 60 or 70 flyers left. And I remember pulling up into the neighborhood, and the very first thing you see to the entrance to the neighborhood was a "We Buy Houses" sign hanging on a tree. And I was like, I might as well skip this neighborhood because if they were going to sell their house, they would have sold it to the guy that had his sign up. And I said, at the same time, I am trying to get rid of these flyers. It's cold, it's dark, I'm ready to be done. So I went ahead and flyered the neighborhood anyway, and got a call from a seller who was ready to relocate to North Carolina, and that was my first deal. Learned a whole lot of lessons.
So what did you do? Did you flip it?
So ultimately, I ended up flipping. So it was a lease option deal. The plan on a lease,
So wait, explain the lease option.
absolutely, plan on a lease option deal is number one, you're not, you're doing owner financing or leasing the property from the seller. So you're not closing on it. You're not coming with cash to close on it. Essentially, you're renting with the option to buy from the seller. Now, what you're trying to do is then trying to find a buyer tenant. So you're finding a person who's going to rent the property and exercise an option of purchase, typically in a year to 2 years. That's how it's supposed to work, right?
So you were the middleman in that.
Yeah.
You're leasing it from
Yeah.
the seller. You're kind of subletting it to someone
With
else.
permission. Yeah.
And
It's also called
with
a sandwich lease option.
now I never heard of that. Now I don't do rentals
Right.
much, but I never heard of that. So the sandwich deal, in a sense, is just basically what you're doing. You lease it from the seller, then you find someone else to actually rent the property, and you're the middleman in that transaction.
Correct.
And you hope for them to buy it in the end, like a year down the road. So are they buying it from you?
Correct. So yep, that's what they're doing. And they can buy it from you. They can exercise the option to buy it directly from the seller. Just the way you exit the deal, you have a little bit of leeway. You can do double closings, but
So kind of the same like how a wholesale would
yeah,
work.
it's
You can either do like a ABC or
think of a wholesale deal that lasts a year and a half to 2 years.
okay.
It's ideal when there's not a lot of equity in a deal. And a reason why it's ideal when there's not a whole lot of equity. Number one, typically you're not spending a lot on fix-up. With a lease option deal, you're offering it to these buyer tenants, and they get to create some sweat equity. Also, since you're not having to close on it, so you don't have, your first set of closing costs, you don't have your financing costs, you don't have real estate commissions. You're paying ideally because you're finding your buyer without having to list it on the market and pay a commission. So it's ideal when there's not a whole lot of equity, and it does allow things like equity build up. Now, a lot of times what happens.
Quick question.
Yeah.
So now, are you negotiating the sales price of the house in the beginning, or are you negotiating it later on if they exercise? Like, so you and the seller, when do you negotiate that sales price?
So you negotiate that sales price. I mean, that's typically first conversation, right? So you find out the amount that the seller needs to or wants to get, and of course you've got to, at that point you have a meeting of the minds or negotiation starts. So you set or agree upon a purchase price, and then of course as with you being in the middle of that lease option, you've got to set the exit price. and it creates, and there are a couple of profit centers. So in a lease option deal, one profit center is the buyer tenant is going to give a option consideration. All right. So it's typically, sometimes they'll say, typically say 3 to 10% of the sales price. On this particular deal, the option consideration the buyer tenant paid was $7,000. Right. So that's $7,000.
So they paid the $7,000 to you.
Yep, paid it to me. That goes towards the purchase price if they exercise the option. If they don't exercise the option, it's a non-refundable option fee. So that's $7,000. That was almost immediate profit. Then of course you've got your monthly cash flow. So keep in mind you're not going to closing on this property immediately. So you've got financing that's already in place for this property. The mortgage in place was, I remember it was like $753 a month, including PI/TI. So including principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. And this was a 3-bedroom, 2004. So it was being rented at $1,350 a month. So it was some cash.
So now, were you paying the mortgage?
I was responsible for it.
Directly. So you weren't paying the homeowner.
Oh, yeah.
You were paying the mortgage directly.
To ensure the mortgage is actually getting paid, right?
Getting paid. Exactly.
You'd hate to give the owner $1,300. The $753 a month, and then find out
they weren't paying innocent foreclosure. Right. Exactly.
So that was paid directly to the mortgage. So it did create an immediate cash flow of almost $700 a month. And then, of course, the biggest profit center is on the exit, right? So when you do sell the property to this buyer tenant, so I had an agreed upon purchase price with the seller of $125, and at the time the property might have been worth like $140. So it wasn't a whole lot of equity there. It just at the time it wasn't. And I set an exit price. I set a sale price with the buyer tenant of $150. Okay. Now I was in that deal for like a year, 8 months. Over that year and 8 months, two things happened. So debt pay down, right? So the underlying balance of the mortgage was paid down. Also appreciation. And ultimately that deal, so in the end on that deal, the buyer tenant wasn't able to purchase. They came into it with less than ideal credit. Year, 8 months later, their credit was even less.
You probably knew that anyway.
Was even less than ideal. So it got worse.
Right. So you pocketed that $7,000 plus the extra $700 a month. And now, did you did you put another tenant in, or did you just purchase it?
So did a minor rehab after the tenants moved out. Also worth noting, the tenants didn't pay the last 2 months of their rent. So some of that option consideration they paid up front went to cover debt service. And then did probably a light $10,000 renovation. They sold it for $180-something thousand.
So how many of those kind of deals did you do?
I've done, that was my first and only lease option deal. I have done owner financing deals since then, but right after that deal, I jumped into more rehabs and wholesales. So more straightforward deals, deals that had more equity, more meat on the bone just from the get-go. But lease options are still a very viable strategy.
Right. It's probably something that people now that's getting into real estate never thought of doing. And, people are always looking for that low out-of-pocket way of investing. This is a great way to jump in and get started. You did this how many years ago?
This was 2003, 2004. So.
Right. So many years ago, but it's still something that can be done.
Some of the best deals you can ever do are owner finance deals, right? As investors, we often have issues with capital. Like it's not enough capital to go around, and owner financing certainly helps you alleviate those issues, right?
So how much did you normally have to put down though with owner financing? Was it the 20%?
No, on that one I didn't have to put anything down. So on that,
That was the lease.
yeah, on that lease option didn't have to put anything down.
Right.
The thing was is that owner said, from the day evening I met the owner, she said she was gone in about 30 days. So once we came to agreement on price, the agreement was mortgage payments become my responsibility in 30 days, hell or high water. Now, a lot of lease option agreements do have a stipulation where you're leasing and you can give keys back to the owner and say, hey, it's not working out. But the reality is anybody who moves out of their house and relocates to North Carolina doesn't want the house back, right? That conversation ain't going to go over well at all, regardless of what they sign. So it was my understanding that, I am responsible for this $800, a month, whether I had a tenant, no tenant, paying tenant, non-paying tenant, didn't matter.
So now, were you doing this and you were working, or did you just jump in like full
Yep,
time?
no, I was working in corporate America doing market research. Yep, so I was working.
So what made you decide, you know what? I'm going in full time doing investing. What happened that made you say like this investing thing is just a better deal than me spending 8 hours working for someone else?
I mean, and it's not romantic at all, but I just saw the profit potential. I mean,
That's romantic. It's romantic to me.
it's very romantic to me, but it's not it's not like I played with building blocks as a kid, and I saw the profit potential from real estate. One thing I love about real estate is you can kind of do it however you want to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some investors, dress up in suits and have an office building with their name on it. And other very successful investors don't even have business cards and only wear sweatpants and jeans. So you can kind of do it however you want to, and on your terms. It's funny the misconception of being a real estate investor is, well, number one, I think everybody should kind of own real estate as part of an investment strategy. But the funny thing is, if you own mutual funds, a 401k, people don't call you a stock trader, right? If you own one house, they're like, oh, you must be a real estate investor, right? And it doesn't have to be that way. So, but I do think real estate should be a part of everybody's investment portfolio, just because it gives you. The thing I liked about it was that it gave me control, right? I couldn't, look, on a stock, I can pick the stock. I cannot control how they choose to do accounting, or how they cook the books, and how it affects the stock price. I can pick what house I buy, what neighborhood I buy, and what the exit strategy is. So from that standpoint,
Right.
I've got what I feel like is a lot more control.
So how did you end up in building? Now, I know you say infill. I'm not part of the, developers and builder community, so I'm not familiar with all of the builder terms. So the infill, is there a different kind of, builder? What is infill?
So infill is simply in any area that's kind of, let's say already 80 to 90% built up, right? And you've got house, no house, house. Well, guess what? I'm going to put a house where there is no house. And the advantage of infill development is it allows some agility. It allows you to move faster. You're spending less on infrastructure because, for instance, in a typical, high density neighborhood, it's already 80 to 90% built up. I'm not guessing if there is access to utilities like water, electric, and gas. Right. If there are 4 houses to the left of me, 4 houses to the right, 8 houses across the street, the chances of me not being able to get water, gas, and electric is almost next to nothing. And that's why I love infill development. Now, if I move, in a DC, Maryland area, if I move outside of the Beltway, either greater Baltimore area or greater DC metropolitan area, if I move outside of the Beltway to areas that are less densely developed on larger tracts of land, the availability of those utilities isn't a given anymore, right? Sometimes to develop those lots to bring utilities to them, sometimes you're talking about 6 figures, 7 figures
Right.
to bring utilities.
That's usually those a big plot of land where they're going to do multiple houses.
Right.
Now, do you only do the infill? So I'm assuming the infill is just in a developed community and there might be a lot. So do you only do just lots or a house that's on there and just tear it down and then start over?
So I have not done a tear down yet. For me, on most tear down deals I see presented to me, the economics don't work. So in a hot real estate market, even a house that needs to be torn down is overpriced, right? Because while it needs to be torn down and the value is in the land, there's always someone. Sometimes it's the seller. Sometimes there's a buyer pool that think, I'm gonna fix this house up. I'm gonna. I watch HGTV and I'm gonna flip this house, and I'm like, okay, you're paying a whole lot for for something where the value is only in the land. But if the economics work, I would do it. I would do it in a heartbeat.
So how did you learn you did the lease option? I'm assuming you did some regular rehab
I
deals.
did lease option, went right into rehabbing, learned wholesaling as in 2011 and 12 got back into rehabbing a lot more. And then as we rolled into 2016, when I kind of saw the market getting super competitive again, that was when I decided that building offered a competitive advantage. There wasn't a line around a block, to buy a lot.
To buy a
Right?
lot.
And
But how did you learn how to do it? Because if I just saw a lot, I wouldn't know really the first thing to do. I know it needs a foundation, but how did you learn how to actually develop that lot?
so,
Did you just kind of wing it?
no, absolutely
Okay.
not. No, I don't recommend anybody wing it.
I don't either, but I
But
want to know your
yeah,
experience.
but mentors and coaches, So
So that's important in any industry, having a mentor or a coach who's done it to help guide you and, steer you away from those pitfalls.
yeah, don't get me wrong. Look, you can figure out almost anything on your own.
But it might cost you.
Yeah, it's right. It typically is gonna cost you, and often the cost of ignorance, and not from a derogatory term, but just the fact that you don't know. The cost of ignorance is typically tenfold the cost of education. But I spent 3 days in Richmond, Virginia, with a good buddy, Chris Jefferson, who was a builder in a Richmond area, and I just spent 3 days sitting in a room with him, with a whiteboard, and just kind of learning the process. But most importantly, getting confidence, because here's the thing about new building. When I began to see the opportunity, I saw the opportunity, but I also saw and probably focused initially on a challenge, right? I
had a post about that today too.
saw all the stuff that could go wrong, and I'm sure everybody else who was thinking about building focused on everything that could go wrong. And I was like, okay. And I was like, at this point, I've rehabbed a whole bunch of houses, some pretty scary ones, and still the idea of building new intimidates me. And I said, okay, that's a good thing. That is a good thing, because right on the other side of that challenge is opportunity, right? Because I'm all for barriers to entry as long as the process to get over them is clear, right? I'm not for rules that get rewritten unfairly to keep people out. But when there's a barrier to entry and there's a process, there's a documented process to navigate and overcome it, I'm for it, because if you navigate and get through that process, you deserve that opportunity that's on the other side. So I spent really like the better part of a year just kind of talking to people that had experience in building, formal sitting down with a coach, going over a process before the first new build project got underway in 2017.
So when you had that first one, what was like the biggest mistake that you made on that project?
Everything. I mean, everything took longer than and cost more than, right? And keep in mind, I had a documented process from someone that was in the business, but I mean, there are just certain lessons that you are bound to learn the hard way.
From experience.
Certain lessons you're bound. It's human nature. It's the human condition.
Right.
But yeah,
So for people that are scared to jump out there because, oh, I might make a mistake, it's inevitable. You got to make those mistakes because the best teacher is experience. So, sometimes people might look at you now and not think about, well, you had a first deal too. And it didn't go easy. And I'm sure you still have some challenges now. But back then, what would you say some of your challenges were? Because, we've talked, and just you being a Black guy who's a builder, I don't see many of people that look like you building. So I have to assume that there's not a whole lot out there. And that in itself might have been a challenge.
Yeah, and I'm sure it was. And I didn't focus on it. Listen, being so even in our area, even in the DC metro, greater Baltimore area, where we're based. I mean, where we've got a large minority population. I mean, there are. Listen, I mean, even within real estate investment business, sometimes we just don't see a lot of people that look like us, and I'm so used to it at this point. It doesn't usually bother me much. Particularly on new builds or even rehabs, anytime you're doing work to a property, the place where your opportunity and your challenge are always going to be project management. I don't care if you're rehabbing to rent. I don't care if you're building from the ground up. I don't care if you're rehabbing to sell. Project management is always going to be where you've got an opportunity to do better, get it done faster, cheaper, or it's got an opportunity to just take longer and cost more.
So how do you do project management? Do you have a system? Do you just have a checklist? How do you?
So for our new build, we did have a kind of a checklist. Now, honestly, we probably ignored a lot of the checklists. Like, I mean, a checklist is only good when you reference it and when you don't skip steps. Like that's sometimes a checklist. You're like, yeah, I mean,
I don't need to do that one.
Step 3, but I'm kind of thinking let's go straight to step 4. So it's only as good as your discipline to follow that process, to follow that checklist. So and listen, that's something that is an ongoing evolution. That's an ongoing evolution of trying to kind of document processes. Process improvement is something that I'll probably be working on forever, right?
Yeah, we all in any industry or business that you're in, things change. And it's best to document your processes, not just for yourself, but to be able to pass that on as well. And also sometimes it allows you to see where some of your bottlenecks in your systems are and, areas of improvement that need to be made. So absolutely. Now, how do you normally find your lots?
So lots, I found the thing that's different. So I have not purchased a lot of houses from the MLS. I just haven't. A lot of times I don't find deals that give the type of returns I want on a multiple listing system, right? But I knew infill development was different when I kind of looked and saw like, okay, uh, probably 75% of lot purchases have been sourced from the multiple listing system, meaning this was something that anybody else could have purchased, right? Um, but some very profitable deals were purchased from the MLS. I mean, so I was like, that's different because it's in our market. Not saying you don't find great house deals on the MLS, but it takes a whole lot. And so on these, 75% of lot purchases have been sourced off of the MLS. Probably the other 25% have been sourced by referral, by word of mouth.
Okay, so you don't generally drive neighborhoods looking for lots.
I look, and I market, and I've attempted to purchase uh, some off market lot inventory, and a lot. Sometimes it's funny. The seller will be like, "No, I'm not ready to sell yet. I was thinking about it," and then one day it pops up on the MLS, and I'm like, "You could have called me. I mean, but whatever." Yeah.
So I know something else that is hard for some people, and it's probably like a science, but like, so how do you look at a lot and price it and say, okay, if I acquire this lot for this amount, I'm going to put this kind of house on it. It's going to cost this much, and then I'm going to sell it for that. Now, do you have a formula for that, or is it just like you just have a knack for it? Like you can just in your head figure that out?
Yeah, yes, and yes. So it starts out by knowing knowing the neighborhood or neighborhoods you want to build in, right? Right. It's the easiest way to find a needle in a haystack is to make that haystack as small as possible, right? So there are probably about 10 neighborhoods that I build in, 10 to 12 neighborhoods I build in. So once I remove the other hundreds of neighborhoods, that makes it easier already. So once I already know that neighborhood, why I want to build there, I know what the ideal end product looks like, because that's, you always, on deals, you kind of start with the exit in mind. You reverse that way. You can reverse engineer the numbers. Even if a seller says, you know what, I'll sell this lot. I don't know how much I want. Make me an offer. Well, that becomes easy once I know, okay, number one, what is the desirable end product? How much does that end product sell for? How much will that product cost to build? And then that helps me determine how much I can pay for the dirt. If I went into it without those things clear, it's a good chance I grossly overpay for the dirt or make an offer that's grossly, that's underbidding. Neither one of those is good, right? In one hand, I'm not being competitive, and on the other hand, I'm getting into a deal that's not gonna make money. So just knowing those neighborhoods, knowing the end product, that's paramount. That's paramount.
So how long has it taken you to really like fine tune that, knowing what it's going to cost? Because I'm assuming, once you have your neighborhoods, you know how much houses in the area cost, but you also need to know how much materials cost and how much labor is going to cost and all of those things. And I think
That,
that's probably the scary part for most people,
that
not knowing those
it's
costs.
and it's an ongoing process because as you can imagine, the cost of materials and the cost of even labor are moving up,
Hmm.
right? I mean, they're moving. So a house, whatever it costs to build a house in the end of 2019, it's not going to cost you the same amount to build the exact same house on the exact same lot this year. It's not gonna happen. So that is something that's always evolving. I think for me, just coming from going being in rehabs first gave me a baseline of what things cost.
Hmm.
With the difference between building new and rehabbing, really, number one, you spend a whole lot more time just working to get permits, right? Typically, the permitting process is in my area, let's say 3 to 4 months when things go smoothly, and then you've got even before permitting, you've got probably
Wait, for infill, it's 3 to 4 months just for the permits?
just permits.
Ooh.
Yeah, just for permits. And that's once again, that's kind of assuming minimal revisions, right? If you've got an architect who doesn't know what they're doing, I mean that process could be longer. But
Wow.
3 months. Now listen, that's not terrible in a grand scheme of things, right?
I mean, it sounds terrible to me. So, how long does it take from the time you acquire the land to a finished product,
So so
approximately?
so I say from closing to closing, from the day you purchase the dirt to the day you sell a finished house, expect about a year to a year and 3 months.
Wow.
And
So, so much can change in that time.
right. So and that's why it's so one thing about the neighborhoods I consider them to be well insulated neighborhoods. Um, so my philosophy is, I wouldn't build a house in a neighborhood where I wouldn't be willing to build 20 or 30 of them. So if it's a neighborhood where I'm like, you know what, I don't know about this neighborhood, but I'll do one. If I'm not sure about it, then dude, why even do one?
And why
Oh
you doing it?
what?
Because so much can change,
Yeah. So
like if you bought a piece of land right now and you're saying it could take a year to a year and 3 months,
it don't.
well, a year and 3 months could be a whole different ball
Right.
game.
But when you pick well insulated neighborhoods,
Right.
neighborhoods that are kind of established neighborhoods
Yeah.
with demonstrated demand, um, you're insulated, right? And also,
Yeah.
I don't look at a piece of dirt and say I could sell it for X amount today. Next year should be worth X plus 10%. I'll look at it and say, no, I'm basing it on what I can sell it for today based on not one comp, but established comps. And I'm not assuming any appreciation at all. I'm not. Now, if it
Yeah.
appreciates, great, right?
Yeah.
If it doesn't appreciate, also great. But if I underwrite that deal assuming appreciation and it's not there, I'm in trouble.
So how are you financing your deals now? Are you just financing them yourself or
So
are you getting a loan for them?
combination of cash on hand, debt partners or equity partners. So
Okay.
so cash on hand is usually needed to get into the deal. Debt partners is just that, just having a lender or a private lender or even a bank, and an equity partner, somebody who's putting up capital for a piece of the profits.
So when you have to put your cash on hand, is that generally 10%, 20%, 25%?
It depends. So
And is it on the total deal or is it on the land portion?
So a typical scenario would be um, paying for most of the land, right? Because listen, a lot of lenders, their attitude is, okay, if it's a rehab, they're like, we don't want to take your house back, right? We don't want to take back a house you're rehabbing, but we will, right? As a lender, we will. The attitude towards land is like, we really don't want to take land back because, once again, there are less people willing to step in and buy land anyway. So a lot
Right.
of lenders see land as a riskier proposal. So in turn, they do want to see that, okay, at least you've paid for the land or you've got a fair amount of skin in the game. That way, if we have to take this land back and sell it at fire sale prices, at least we're closer to being made whole.
Right.
So typically, so all things considered, a new construction deal, an infill development deal versus a rehab deal, you're gonna have less people willing to finance it, and potentially putting more skin in the game. But like anything, it's very much relationship driven. It is very much relationship
Hmm.
driven, right? You can have the best deal in the world, and if you don't have a track record or you've got a bad track record, no partner, no lender is going to want to touch it. If you've got a deal that's just okay, but you've got a great track record, lenders may say, hey, look, you know, based on your track record, we feel our capital is secure in your hands, more secure than, a better deal down the street with a guy or gal that does not have a track record. So it is very much
Right.
relationship driven.
Right. Okay. So back to like the construction part.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have your own crew that you usually employ, or do you hire like
So we
a
so we
construction
manage
company?
we manage our own projects. We don't have any salaried employees. We manage all of the individual trades. So they're
And so you just hire the people onto
yeah,
the job as
yeah.
needed. Okay. How many projects are you normally doing at one time?
So right now the count is, I wrote it down. The count is, so right now for new builds, in between acquisition and actual building, there are seven projects right now. One that's in acquisition. Hopefully, I've got clear to close in the next week or so. Four in design and permitting. Two being built. That's on the build side. On the
So you just kind of move them along into
yeah. So
the next
so
the
so
next project.
ideally, you've got a pipeline and not a warehouse. So
Hmm.
an ideal pipeline is where you've got that where you got projects moving through various phases, anything from being in escrow to buy it, to design and permitting, to under construction and being in escrow to sell it, right? And ideally, you've got it's kind of evenly spaced out, right? You don't have all seven projects in escrow to purchase at the same time, because that means you're going to have all seven in permitting at the same time, all seven under
Right.
construction at the same time, all seven trying to sell at the same time. That, as you can imagine, that's a cash flow nightmare. Um,
I can
so,
imagine.
so
I definitely can
ideally,
imagine.
ideally, you've got a pipeline, right? So not a warehouse of
Hmm.
just deals all sitting at the same place, but a pipeline of, okay, one is, one comes into the pipeline via acquisition to sell next week. That's
You
ideal.
just kind of
Yeah,
just keeping the flow
yeah, that's
going.
ideal. Never happens though.
So how many of these have you done approximately?
So for infield new builds, done three over 3 years, and then, like I say, then plan for the next year to year and a half, just based on right now, would be
So wait, since 2016?
17. First one
2017.
was completed end of 17. So call it three years, give or take.
No, how many of the infill projects have you done? Like, how many houses have you built?
Right, infill three infill.
Just three?
Three, yeah.
It seems like it's been so many
I
more.
mean, and
I'm always seeing your yellow
well,
door
that's
pop up.
a ton of rehabs also. Ton of
Okay.
rehabs also. So right now for rehabs, right now there are 6 rehabs right now. 2 in the acquisition phase, should be closing in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks on those, and 4 in various stages of rehab. Everything from just starting to hitting the market next week.
So which one do you like doing more?
Um, I don't have a preference. I don't. I'm very numbers driven, right? So I don't.
Okay, which one has the best numbers?
All things being considered, the new builds, less competition, like simply, right? So markets force efficiency, right? So in a very hot market, typically that just means that profits are going to be squeezed on an asset class that everybody wants.
Once,
You
yeah.
take an asset class that not so many people are looking for, and all things being considered, profits do increase. Look, they both have their ups and downs. The downside to a new build is that it takes longer, which is one reason it has to make more money. If it's going to take longer, you're going to have real holding costs. You're going to have opportunity costs. So in my opinion, it needs to make more money
Right.
since it's taking you longer. On a new build, your costs are much more front loaded. Typically, in between due diligence, design, and permitting on an average project, you're out of pocket somewhere around $40,000. Right, 40K. So not to actually build anything, but typically to have a stack of papers that say you can build. So 40K between.
Right. That definitely is a lot.
Right. So it's that can be frustrating. You say, okay, it's taking me in between design and permitting, it's taking 4 or 5 months. I'm out of pocket 40,000, and then and only then does the real work begin. On a rehab,
Right.
$40,000, you've probably made a decent dent in the actual rehab. You
Right.
might be heading towards the finish line, where on a new build, you're just getting started.
So how has the pandemic affected your business? Has it had a positive effect, a negative effect?
Overall positive. Overall positive. The negative effects have been limited to things taking longer. Everything from the recordation of title, right? I mean, the courthouses have slowed down. Material costs have gone up and
Yes.
taken longer. Well,
Yes.
so
Because I remember you when I was building my house, you were seeing if you can keep
we
up
did.
with a regional builder.
Because because what happens is, at that time lumber prices were shooting through the roof, and even though they were shooting through the roof, builders weren't like, okay, I'm not going to buy lumber. They said, okay, I still need the lumber. I mean, you almost doubled on me overnight. I still need it though, and
Yeah.
so things like windows were taking.
It took a long time. Our house, everything was practically up,
uh,
no windows. And I was so pissed. Like, where are our windows? Siding too. Siding, like there was no siding on the house. There was
Right.
brick on the front, no siding on the
And
house.
figure this. So for the lumber companies, the window suppliers, even the appliance manufacturers, when there's a supply chain issue, you got to figure like whose order were they filling first? Were they filling my order
Those
first,
They
or
was
your
doing those
builder?
big orders, right? Those
Your
builders.
your builder. Yeah. Same.
Yeah.
And also there did become, and there's still some labor shortages, right? Because let's face it, if you could have gotten paid $60,000 to not work,
To sit on the couch.
yeah,
A
hey,
lot of
listen,
them were taking that
and
option.
nobody making
Yep.
that choice. So you could, pick stay inside at $60,000 or be outside in contact with other people for far less. I mean, that was the easy decision. So even now, still, there are labor shortages. I mean,
Hmm.
there is tough time finding skilled labor. So just in the same example of, well, if there's a shortage of lumber, who do you think the lumber yard is going to fill first? They're going to fill the big
Hmm.
builders order first. If there's a shortage of concrete contractors, who do you think the concrete contractor? What job do you think they're going to pick? Mine or the
Right.
big builder that's like, well, look, if you can't show up for this one, forget about the
Right.
other 20 or 30. Right? They're going to be at the big builder all the time.
Yeah. So just a couple more
Absolutely.
questions. So what is a typical day like for you?
So typical day is
What time do you wake up?
uh, 5 a.m. give or take. So simply up at 4:30. Getting exercise in by 5:30 or 6. Um, Getting ready for the day, catching up on emails and etc. From the day prior. And then after that, it goes crazy. After that, like
Mhm.
the plan I had, it falls apart more often than not. But a typical day is really is really trying to do, I don't know, 2 days worth of stuff in one day. That's the typical day.
What time does it end?
Um, Probably like around 10, give or take.
At night?
Mm-hmm. Not crazy.
Oh wow.
Not crazy. Not crazy. Not too crazy.
That's crazy. Waking up at 4, 4:30 and ending at
Um,
10. Do you work 5 days a week, 7 days a week, 3 days a week?
8 days a week. Nah. Okay. But
Oh,
nah, it's nah. But listen, I do know how to kind of unplug as I need to. I mean, I enjoy what I do, so that's a challenge because when you enjoy, so they say, when you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life, right? The fact is, when you love what you do, you work every day in your life. So it is a little bit of challenge to know work is still work, even though you enjoy it. Work is work. Work isn't relaxation. It's not to be confused. So that is a little bit of challenge, and also I'm always just trying to get better on focusing on the things that really move the needle. Um,
right.
when on an average day, when you create this to-do list, right? Um, we all kind of naturally go towards the tasks that are easy, right? But typically, those tasks aren't the ones that are most impactful at all. So
Hmm.
just like with building or with real estate deals, where the profitable projects are the ones that are hard. Typically, when it comes to tasks, the ones that are hard are the ones that are impactful. So you got to be like, the one so the one on the to-do list that's been on the to-do list every day for the last week is
Hmm.
probably the one I need to do. Not the new ones I added this morning, but
Right.
probably the one that's been there since Friday. The one I'm not looking forward to
Right.
doing,
Just get it
the one
done.
that feels like it's going to take 8 hours is probably the one I need to start doing like right now.
So, what would you tell someone that is considering going into building, infill building? What would you tell them?
I would say do it. So I would say spend time researching it, learning it. So for me, like one of the first things I did was like go on YouTube, right? I mean, YouTube is a great resource. Like to this day now, and I watch more YouTube than regular TV, right? Um, but start doing some research. So find
Mhm.
find out if you think it's for you. You won't have all the answers, so don't think that going to YouTube University is gonna get you there. But you will start to get a feel for is it really for you? Like knowing, and you got to kind of be in tune with who you are and what you like and what you don't like.
Right.
Don't simply say, well, it seems like it makes money. Cool. There's a lot of things in the world that make money, but if it's not for you, it won't make you money. But then
Right.
after you've kind of said, okay, it's for me, start to talk to people that are doing exactly what you want to do. All right, and you
Exactly.
gotta be clear about this is what I want to do. This is what I'm looking to learn. Um, and ask would they mentor you formally, not informal, not you don't want to can I pick your brain them to death. You
Right.
don't want to even if they're willing to
They don't even have time
even if they're willing
for
to
that.
oblige you, you just even if they are nice and they let you pick their brain to death, you still won't get to where you want to. There does come a time when you've got to be like, okay, I need to formally, have a coach or mentor with a clear goal of what is deemed success, and if it's to learn a
Exactly.
process to whatever,
Yep.
but you do have to eventually do that if you want to make that
Yep.
leap. And it's in this business, you're always going to have mentors and or coaches. Sometimes they're peer mentors, but you're always going to have them. There's never a time in which you're going to know everything. Um,
Yep. They always say your coach should have a coach.
I'm sure they do. I am most coaches I know do have coaches. Most
Exactly.
There are some people who are
Yes.
great at what they do, but that doesn't just make a great coach immediately. That doesn't. I mean, coaching is something. It's a skill, and so for instance, you might have somebody who could build a house with their eyes closed. Doesn't make them a great coach. So some of those people have coaches to turn them into great coaches.
Exactly. So, last question.
Yeah.
What's next for you?
So next is just continuing to apply the lessons I learn every day to just seeking out other challenges and other opportunities. For infill development, um, building a single house is somewhat low hanging fruit, right? It's pretty easy, straightforward to see, but those lessons I've been learning over the years, I can start to apply them to multi-unit. I can start to apply them to mixed use. I can start to apply them to other asset classes within within real estate. So it's I mean so there, I mean there's still a lot for me to learn, and still a lot of challenges to seek out within building. I'm working
Yeah.
on right now. I'm working on my first modular build project as a way to kind of um, open up my capacity. Because right now I said there were probably a dozen neighborhoods I build in, and these neighborhoods are far from affordable. These are 800,000 to $1 million plus neighborhoods. And those are the
Hmm.
neighborhoods I seek out because I deem the potential profit to be worth it. But
Hmm.
so that just means there's so many other places I right now I don't deem it profitable to build. So I am working on my first modular project as a way to save time on construction, bring the costs down, and open up the opportunity to areas that are 400,000 to $500,000.
Okay. Well, that sounds awesome. And I wish you the best. I thank you so much for being on my podcast and sharing your information, sharing your experiences with me and my audience. So I'm going to be watching and learning. Now, you did have classes. Are you going to have any classes coming up for people that might want to learn?
Yeah, I'll likely. So I was doing. So last year I was doing on-site classes. These were classes done at an actual project. Classes lasted 4 hours. They were usually limited to about 20 people. Um, but I will be starting classes likely second quarter of this year. Some on-site classes, but likely doing most of the classes online, doing virtual classes. And that way, just that way it allows me to offer that to people who aren't located in Washington D.C. or Northern Virginia.
Well, when you have that up and running, I'll make sure I get that information from you so I can share it with people that are interested in learning to do what you do. And again, thank you so much for your time and for your information. And I wish you the best in future projects.
Except the honor was all mine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.